13 destinations, 13 echoes, and countless stories still left untold. Remember, what we call the past is sometimes only a thin veil. Beyond it are the spirits still waiting to be heard. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the mysteries ahead. What if grief built walls? What if guilt built doors that never led anywhere? In the heart of San Jose, California, there stands a house, but not just any house, a sprawling, winding, confounding maze of 160 rooms, staircases that ascend into ceilings, doors that open into thin air, and windows set in floors. A house not built from architectural plans, but from fear, from obsession, from sorrow, and perhaps from whispers of the dead. This is the Winchester Mystery House, a mansion like no other in America. To understand its story is to descend into the mind of a woman haunted not just by ghosts, but by grief that refused to let go. Sarah Lockwood Winchester was no ordinary woman. She was born into privilege in New Haven, Connecticut in 1839, smart, artistic, educated in the finest schools available to women of her time. But her fate was entwined with one of the deadliest inventions in American history, the Winchester rifle. She married William Wirt Winchester, the heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. This company didn't just manufacture firearms, it revolutionized them. The Winchester rifle was dubbed the gun that won the West, and it played a central role in the brutal expansion of the American frontier. Cowboys, soldiers, settlers, and death, so much death. But Sarah's life would soon be touched by a series of unbearable losses. First, her infant daughter Annie died of marasmus, an obscure, devastating form of malnutrition. Then in 1881, her husband died from tuberculosis. Within a few years, Sarah had become a childless widow and sole heir to a fortune soaked in blood, more than $20 million, over $500 million today, and 50% ownership of the rifle empire. Money beyond imagination, but no comfort. According to legend, in her grief, Sarah sought the help of a Boston medium. The story goes that this medium channeled William's spirit, who revealed a terrible truth. Sarah was cursed. All the people who had died from the Winchester rifle, Native Americans, Civil War soldiers, innocent victims, were seeking revenge. The spirits were real, and they were coming for her. There was only one way to appease them: move them. The medium said, "And build a house, build endlessly, never stop. If you continue building, you will live. If you stop, you will die." In 1886, Sarah arrived in the Santa Clara Valley and purchased an unfinished farmhouse. Then, the construction began, and it never truly ended. For 38 years, day and night, crews worked under Sarah's instructions. No architect, no master plan, just hand-scribbled notes from the lady of the house. Rooms were added on top of rooms, wings were torn down and rebuilt, entire staircases were constructed only to lead directly into ceilings. There were doors that opened to nothing, just a sheer drop into the garden below, windows that looked into other rooms, secret passageways. Spider web patterns embedded into stained glass. A seance room hidden in the heart of the house where Sarah allegedly communed nightly with the dead. Locals whispered, carpenters scratched their heads. No one understood it, but Sarah didn't build a home. She built a labyrinth, a spiritual fortress to confuse, mislead, and perhaps imprison the ghosts that followed her. Every detail had meaning. Every stair was a step away from the spirits. Every locked room held a secret or a story. To walk through the Winchester Mystery House today is to enter a dream you cannot quite wake from. Visitors speak of sudden cold spots, even on California's warmest days. Footsteps echoing down hallways long empty. The sound of hammering at midnight, though no workmen are present. A ghostly figure in black, believed to be Sarah herself, seen wandering the hallways, still inspecting, still rebuilding. In one of the most chilling sightings, a staff member cleaning the ballroom late one night claimed to see a man in work overalls vanish before her eyes. When shown a photo of a longtime carpenter from the 1900s, she paled. "That's him," she whispered. "The spirits here are not malicious, but they are persistent. They are echoes of violence, shadows of unfinished business, the weight of lives ended by cold steel and hot lead." Perhaps Sarah believed she could buy forgiveness with timber and glass, or perhaps she wasn't seeking redemption, only survival. Was Sarah Winchester mad, or did she know something we still struggle to accept? Psychologists today might diagnose her with prolonged grief disorder, PTSD, or psychosis. but she was also brilliant, fluent in 4 languages, classically trained in architecture and design. She paid workers triple the going wage, offered free meals, and ensured no one worked on Sundays. This wasn't just a haunted house. It was an act of mourning, an expression of artistic terror, the longest eulogy ever built. What is madness, after all, but an attempt to make sense of a world that has stopped making sense? After Sarah's death in 1922, the construction stopped just as suddenly as it had started. Carpenters dropped their tools. The last nails went unhammered, and for the first time in nearly 4 decades, the house slept, but not all was still. Since becoming a historic site, the Winchester House has hosted thousands of curious visitors. Some leave entertained. Others leave shaken. A few never speak of what they saw, because this house is not just haunted by ghosts, it is haunted by grief, by the memory of violence, by the question that has no answer: can one ever escape the consequences of what has been done? Sarah Winchester left behind no diaries, no interviews, no confessions, only the house, only the silence. But if you stand alone in her seance room or touch the doorknob that leads to a wall, you might feel it. The question, the wait, the whisper keep building. What if inspiration didn't come from within, but from something watching you from the end of the hallway? In the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, surrounded by snow-capped peaks and pine forests that hum in the wind, sits a grand white hotel with red-roofed towers and wraparound verandas. It looks peaceful, even picturesque, but behind those elegant walls lies a history steeped in shadows, where laughter once echoed and now footsteps do. This is the Stanley Hotel. A place so haunted, so deeply unsettling, that it didn't just attract tourists, it inspired one of the most terrifying novels of the 20th century. But long before fiction took root, the truth had already arrived, and it never left. The Stanley Hotel opened in 1909, a vision of elegance and refinement in the untamed West. Its founder, Freeland Oscar Stanley, was no stranger to survival, stricken with tuberculosis. He was told he had mere months to live, but the dry air of Estes Park gave him a second chance. In gratitude and perhaps defiance, he built a palace in the mountains. A colonial revival masterpiece meant to bring luxury to the wild frontier. It had electricity, telephones, running water, a marvel in its time. By day it welcomed the elite, by night something else entirely. It began with whispers, guests reporting sudden chills, lights flickering for no reason. Doors opening without a sound. At first, it was easy to dismiss. Old buildings creak after all, but then the sightings came. Room 217, the most infamous in the hotel. Long before it housed a frightened writer named Stephen King, it was home to an explosion. In 1911, a maid named Elizabeth Wilson was lighting the acetylene lanterns when a gas leak ignited. The explosion threw her through the floor and nearly killed her, but she survived. And according to many, she never left. Guests in room 217 have reported strange occurrences, bags unpacked for them in the night, clothes folded neatly, lights turning on and off. Some say Miss Wilson is a proper ghost, a Victorian soul who disapproves of unmarried couples sharing the bed. Others say it's the house itself playing hostess. Then there's the piano. In the music room sits a grand Steinway, once played at galas and high society parties. Now, it sometimes plays itself. Staff lock the lid at night, only to return and find the cover lifted, a single key pressed down, a note held and never resolved. The 4th floor is where the echoes grow louder. Once used for children and nannies, this floor now hums with laughter that no one can trace. Guests have heard giggling, bouncing balls, footsteps running down the corridor. One man swears he awoke to find a child standing at the end of his bed, staring, then vanishing into the wall. Others speak of a phantom cowboy seen in room 428 who appears near the bed, watches for a moment, and disappears. He never speaks, but somehow. That silence is the loudest thing guests remember. In 1974, a struggling writer and his wife arrived as the last guests before winter closure. The halls were empty, the dining room silent. The night cold and endless. Stephen King and his wife Tabitha were given room 217. That night King had a dream, his young son screaming, being chased through the hotel's endless hallways by a possessed fire hose. He woke in a sweat, lit a cigarette, stared out the window. By morning the idea had taken root. Within a year, he published The Shining, a novel about isolation, madness, and a hotel that comes alive with evil. The Stanley Hotel was now infamous, but something strange happened after the book's release. Reports of paranormal activity didn't decrease, they surged, as if the story had given the spirits permission to speak louder. Was it fiction feeding the fear, or had King simply revealed what was already there? Over time, ghost hunters, psychics, and skeptics have all passed through the Stanley's doors. Some leave unimpressed, others leave changed. One paranormal investigator claimed she heard a woman's voice whispering "get out" in her ear during a recording session. Another refused to return after seeing a chair rock slowly with no one near it and no wind in the room. Yet, not all encounters are frightening. Many feel a strange calm in the hotel. A sense that the spirits aren't angry, only present. They are the echoes of parties long over, dreams half-remembered, promises never fulfilled. The Stanley is not malevolent, it's watchful, a keeper of stories, some true, some waiting to be written. Today, tourists flood its halls. They snap photos, join ghost tours, sleep in haunted rooms hoping for a glimpse, a sound, a flicker. But the hotel gives only what it chooses. You don't find its secrets, they find you. And sometimes, if you listen closely at midnight, the walls whisper, not words, but feelings, a hush, a memory, a question. What if a building could remember? Stephen King left with a story, others left with scars, and a few never left at all. But this is only the beginning of America's haunted legacy. Because while the Stanley may hold the fame, there are other places, forgotten places, where the dead walk without applause, and one of them waits behind rusted bars in Philadelphia. A prison of stone and silence, where punishment turned into pure dread. Next, we unlock the gates of Eastern State Penitentiary, where echoing footsteps never quite fade, and the walls remember every scream. What if the punishment never ended? What if stone walls could absorb pain? If a cell could remember every scream, every breathless cry in the dark, and refuse to forget? Tucked behind ivy-covered walls in Philadelphia stands a fortress of silence. Once hailed as the most advanced prison in the world, now it sits in ruins, broken, cold, watching. This is Eastern State Penitentiary, built to reform but remembered for something else entirely. When it opened in 1829, Eastern State was a marvel. It pioneered the Pennsylvania system of incarceration, complete solitary confinement. Inmates were kept in complete isolation for 23 hours a day. No contact, no sound, no light, no names, only numbers. They were given hoods when they left their cells, not to punish them, but to ensure they remained unknown, forgotten, reformed through reflection, redemption through loneliness. But what the system didn't account for was the mind. In this architectural cathedral of despair, many inmates went mad. The silence, designed to rehabilitate, became a slow suffocation. Some scratched words into stone, others spoke to phantoms. Some never spoke again, and some say they still don't. Guards began reporting shadows moving across empty hallways, doors slamming in abandoned wings, the sound of chains dragging long after prisoners were freed. One story comes from cell block 12, known for echoing whispers and distant laughter. A security guard in the 1990s, long after the prison had closed, reported seeing a silhouette dart across the corridor, only to vanish into a sealed cell. The catwalk tower, which once oversaw the prison yard, is now a place of dread. Visitors have claimed to feel an oppressive force, something pushing down on their chest as they ascend. Paranormal teams have recorded disembodied voices, raspy, broken, almost plating. And then there's cell 20, cell block 4. Many visitors avoid it without knowing why. They feel nauseous, dizzy. One tourist collapsed just steps away from the door, whispering afterward, "I saw his face, but there was no face." No one knows who he is, but many believe that Eastern State isn't just haunted by the memories of the inmates. It is haunted by the system itself. A philosophy of silence that echoed into cruelty, a place built to erase identity, that now refuses to let the past go unnamed. Even Al Capone, the infamous gangster, spent time here. He served 8 months in a luxuriously furnished cell, complete with rugs, lamps, and a radio. But even he, surrounded by comforts, claimed to hear crying at night. He told reporters he was being haunted by a man he had killed. He called him Jimmy. The ghosts of Eastern State don't shout, they don't scream, they whisper, and those whispers linger long after you leave. Today, the prison stands as both museum and monument. guided tours, educational programs. Even Halloween horror nights, but many staff refuse to stay after dark, because while the prisoners are long gone, the punishment remains. Some visitors leave feeling unsettled, others feel watched. Few leave changed, but whether you believe or not, one thing is undeniable. Eastern State isn't empty, it breathes. And as we move deeper into America's haunted geography, the path takes a sharper turn. Because if Eastern State was a monument to silence, our next stop is a place that was never quiet at all, where ghosts don't linger in shadows, they sing. In the sweltering heat of the South, a plantation stands beneath moss-covered trees. Its beauty masks its brutality. Its silence is filled with stories, and its spirits, they never stopped speaking. Next, we enter the Myrtles plantation, where mirrors don't reflect the living and footsteps on the stairs belong to those long buried. What if beauty could lie? What if the warm breeze through magnolia trees whispered not comfort but warning? In the small town of St. Francisville, Louisiana, just beyond the winding Mississippi River, stands a house of rare southern elegance. Wraparound porches, hand-carved woodwork, Spanish moss dancing in the wind. To the unknowing eye, the Myrtles plantation is a postcard from the antebellum South, but step past the gates and you'll hear it. The creak of floorboards with no weight, the soft rustle of skirts when no one is near. The quiet, steady echo of footsteps climbing stairs no one climbs. They say it's one of the most haunted homes in America. They're not wrong. Built in 1796 by General David Bradford, the Myrtles was never just a family home. It was a stage for drama, betrayal, and sorrow. Over its 2 centuries, it has seen war, slavery, disease, and death. And through it all, something remained. The most famous story, told in hushed voices and tourist whispers, is that of Chloe. She was an enslaved woman owned by Judge Clark Woodruff, a later resident of the home. According to legend, Chloe was caught eavesdropping on a conversation and had her ear cut off as punishment. From that day, she wore a green turban to hide the scar, seeking to regain favor in the household. Chloe is said to have baked a birthday cake laced with oleander, hoping to make the family sick, then heroically nurse them back to health. But the plan went horribly wrong. The judge's wife and 2 daughters died. Chloe was blamed. The other enslaved people, fearing collective punishment, dragged her from the house, hung her from a tree, and threw her body into the river. Some say that's just a story, but visitors still see her, a figure in a green headscarf, sometimes on the porch. Sometimes just inside the window. She never speaks, she just watches. In 1992, a photograph taken by the proprietors of the Myrtles captured something eerie. A semi-transparent figure standing between 2 buildings, unmistakable and unaccounted for. Experts could not explain it. The shape, the outline, the presence. Was it Chloe? Inside the house, mirrors are said to trap spirits. There's a long-standing tradition in Southern mourning culture. When someone dies, mirrors in the house must be covered to prevent the soul from becoming trapped. After the deaths of Sarah and her children, those who died from the poisoned cake, it's said the mirrors were left uncovered. And now, guests see handprints, faces, smears that never clean, even when the room is empty. The grand staircase is another focal point. At night, footsteps ascend slowly, one by one. Some guests have reported a heavy, unseen hand pressing on their shoulder as they walk past. Others see a woman in 19th century clothing appearing on the landing, only to vanish when approached. Then there's the piano. It plays itself, always the same melody, always at dusk. Staff have locked it, removed the keys, and even placed heavy objects on top. Still it plays. Some say there are at least 12 documented ghosts within the house, each tied to its layered and violent history. Among them, a young girl with curly hair seen staring from an upstairs window, eyes full of sorrow. A Confederate soldier who appears near the entrance hall, rifle slung across his back. Children's laughter heard in the dining room, though no children are present, and the ghost of a former owner who died violently in the house, now seen wandering near the garden at twilight. But unlike other haunted places, the Myrtles isn't defined by aggression, it's defined by memory. Each spirit is a thread woven through the fabric of this land. They aren't trapped by anger, but by what was left undone: love, justice, recognition. Perhaps Chloe seeks forgiveness. Perhaps Sarah still looks for her daughters. Perhaps the piano simply plays because music was the only way the house knew to grieve. Today, the Myrtles is a bed and breakfast. Tourists sleep where others never woke. They take photos in the mirror. whisper prayers in the hallway. Some leave in the middle of the night, unable to explain why, but those who stay, they leave changed. Because the Myrtles is not a place you simply visit, it's a place you remember, long after you leave, long after the lights are out, long after the footsteps have gone quiet. The South is a land of ghosts, and this house, this beautiful trembling house, is their sanctuary. But as we move forward, the path grows colder, because while the Myrtles may haunt with grace and sorrow, our next destination is a queen of steel and sea. A ship that once carried passengers, now carries whispers. Moored in California's foggy harbor, it creaks and shifts, though the engines have long gone still, and in the quietest hours of the night, they say she sails again. Next, we step aboard the Queen Mary, where ocean fog hides more than mist, and the past is only ever a deck away. What if the ocean could keep secrets? What if the sound of waves wasn't just wind and water, but whispers? Docked in Long Beach, California, rests a giant that once ruled the Atlantic. With her towering smokestacks and sleek Art Deco lines, she looks like a queen fallen into slumber, graceful, still, and watching. This is the RMS Queen Mary, a retired ocean liner, a floating hotel, and if the stories are true, a ghost ship. They call her the Gray Ghost, a nickname she earned during World War II, when she was painted dull gray and used to transport over 800,000 soldiers across dangerous waters. She sailed through storms, past torpedoes, through blackouts and loss, and somehow she survived, but not everyone on board did. From her first voyage in 1936 to her final docking in 1967. The Queen Mary has seen over 150 documented deaths, some natural, others not, and many believe that's why she's still so alive. The ship's most haunted location is also its most infamous, door 13 in the engine room, a watertight door used in emergencies, massive, steel, and heavy. In 1966, a young fireman named John Petter was crushed by it during a routine drill. Some say he slipped, others say he was pushed. No one knows for sure. What they do know is that late at night, in the silence of the bowels of the ship, footsteps are heard approaching the door. Heavy boots, a presence, then nothing. Visitors claim to see a man in blue overalls, his face pale, eyes distant, standing near the door before vanishing into the wall. One woman said she felt a cold hand grab hers as she walked by. No one else was there. Then there's the first-class swimming pool, once the jewel of luxury. Its Art Deco tiles still shimmer under ghostly light, though no water remains. The pool was drained decades ago, but something or someone stayed behind. Multiple sightings tell of a young girl in a 1930s bathing suit, dripping wet, walking along the edge of the pool. She's called Jackie. Some say she drowned during a voyage. Others claim she never existed, but people still hear her laughter, still see the small, wet footprints appear and vanish. In the changing rooms nearby, mirrors fog over without heat. Whispered voices echo from empty stalls. Lights flicker, always in sequence. Another presence haunts the Queen's salon, a tall woman in a white evening gown. She's seen dancing alone in the corner, head bowed, arms raised to a partner who isn't there. She's most often spotted when music is playing, and when the music stops, she fades. The B-deck forward, now closed to the public, once housed third-class passengers. Some ghost hunters describe it as the heart of the haunting. Sudden drops in temperature, unexplained knocks, and voices speaking in foreign languages, German, Polish, Italian, sometimes all at once. A crew member swore he saw a man pacing the hallway at night when he followed. The man disappeared through a locked door, and then there's the ship's hull. During wartime, the Queen Mary accidentally collided with and sliced through a smaller escort ship, the HMS Curaçao. Hundreds of sailors were killed, some were sucked beneath her hull and never recovered. To this day, divers inspecting the lower levels report hearing metal creaking as if something beneath is still trying to escape. The Queen Mary is more than haunted, she's layered, each corridor. Each cabin, each handrail touched by millions. Lovers, soldiers, dreamers, the doomed. Unlike houses, ships carry their memories with them, across oceans, through time. Perhaps that's why the Queen Mary doesn't rest, because she never stopped moving. Even now, docked and dormant, she shifts, groans, echoes. Tourists who sleep in her cabins report odd dreams. Some wake to the sound of children running down empty halls. Others hear music from a room that doesn't exist. Some feel watched as they shower. Others feel protected, because not all spirits here are angry. Some, it seems, simply love the sea too much to leave. Today, the Queen Mary is a hotel, a museum, a legend, and a warning, because even in stillness, some journeys never end. And as we leave her decks, the air grows colder, because our next stop isn't floating, it's buried. A hilltop hospital wrapped in vines and tragedy. Once meant for healing, now echoing with the sound of sorrow. Creaking gurneys, empty wheelchairs, forgotten names. Next, we ascend to the decaying halls of Waverly Hills Sanatorium, where the dead are not buried but wheeled through a tunnel in silence. What if death had a waiting room? What if the walls meant to heal became witnesses to hopelessness, and the air itself still carried the weight of last breaths? Rising above the tree line in Louisville, Kentucky, stands a building wrapped in ivy, shadows, and silence. 5 stories of brick and broken windows. It once echoed with footsteps and coughs, and now it echoes with something else. This is Waverly Hills Sanatorium. To some, it's just an abandoned hospital. To others, it's where the dead still walk. In the early 1900s, tuberculosis swept across the American South like a silent plague. In Kentucky, it struck hard. There were no cures, no answers, just time and death. Waverly Hills was built in 1910 to quarantine and treat patients infected with the White Plague. It started small, 40 beds, but the death toll kept rising. By 1926, the sanatorium had expanded into a vast Gothic structure designed to house over 400 patients. It was a place of hope and quiet horror. Patients were treated with radical methods. Lungs collapsed intentionally, ribs removed, bodies rotated hourly to prevent fluid buildup. Many surgeries were experimental, most ended in death. Some estimate over 6,000 people died here. Others claim the number is closer to 63,000. The truth, no one really knows, but the building remembers. On the 5th floor, room 502 stands at the heart of the legend. In 1928, a head nurse was found hanging from the light fixture. Suicide, they said. She was unmarried, pregnant, alone. The shame, they said, drove her to it. 4 years later, another nurse reportedly jumped from the balcony. No one knows why. Visitors say the room is cold, even in July. People hear sobbing. Some feel dizzy just standing near the doorway. Paranormal teams have reported EMF spikes, voice recordings, and shadows that seem to drift through the ceiling. Then there's the death tunnel. Formerly known as the body chute, this 500-foot underground tunnel was used to discreetly remove the dead from the hospital. Corpses were lowered on gurneys via a pulley system, so the living wouldn't see the steady stream of death. The tunnel now lies in darkness. Concrete walls stained by time, but the dead don't always stay quiet. Investigators have reported being touched, pushed, hearing dragging sounds when no one else is near. One visitor swore he heard a whisper say, "Not yet." He left. He never came back. The 3rd floor holds the spirit of a little boy. He's known only as Timmy. No one knows his story, but visitors bring him toys, balls, dolls, cars. They leave them in the hallway and watch as they move on their own. A small ball, untouched, rolls steadily into the shadows, then back. Others have heard giggling or seen a shape dart behind a doorway, too small to be an adult, too fast to follow. On the 4th floor, there are figures that watch from behind glassless windows. Lights flicker on and off, though there's no electricity. Footsteps echo in locked rooms. One tourist, taking photos in the long hallway, captured what she thought was her friend at the other end, but her friend was behind her. The photo showed a woman in hospital robes staring into the camera. And then there's the morgue. Even now, the air feels colder there, heavier. Metal tables still stand. Drawers line the walls, empty yet not. A security guard once locked the room behind him, only to hear the sound of something banging from inside. He opened the door. No one, nothing, only silence. But silence is rarely empty at Waverly. Today, the sanatorium is privately owned. It hosts ghost tours, fundraisers, even horror attractions. Yet many who come expecting cheap scares leave shaken by something they cannot name, because this place isn't just haunted, it's grieving. grieving every breath that rattled in infected lungs, grieving every goodbye whispered through bloodied sheets, grieving the dreams that died here, young, alone, afraid. Waverly Hills is a wound that never closed, a place where death lived so long it left an imprint, and yet there's something almost sacred about it, as if the building refuses to be forgotten, not out of vengeance, but out of memory, to remind us of what was lost, of what we once endured, of how thin the veil between life and death really is. But if you think Waverly is the end of horror, think again, because our next destination is something entirely different. Not a place where the sick came to be healed, but where the insane were locked away, a sprawling asylum, crumbling walls, laughter that never ends, and rooms that have no keys. Next, we step into the decaying mind of Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, where madness still lingers, and the walls whisper secrets only the broken can understand. What if death had a waiting room? What if the walls meant to heal became witnesses to hopelessness, and the air itself still carried the weight of last breaths? Rising above the tree line in Louisville, Kentucky, stands a building wrapped in ivy, shadows, and silence. 5 stories of brick and broken windows. It once echoed with footsteps and coughs, and now it echoes with something else. This is Waverly Hills Sanatorium. To some, it's just an abandoned hospital. To others, it's where the dead still walk. In the early 1900s, tuberculosis swept across the American South like a silent plague. In Kentucky, it struck hard. There were no cures, no answers, just time and death. Waverly Hills was built in 1910 to quarantine and treat patients infected with the White Plague. It started small, 40 beds, but the death toll kept rising. By 1926, the sanatorium had expanded into a vast Gothic structure designed to house over 400 patients. It was a place of hope and quiet horror. Patients were treated with radical methods, lungs collapsed intentionally, ribs removed, bodies rotated hourly to prevent fluid buildup. Many surgeries were experimental, most ended in death. Some estimate over 6,000 people died here. Others claim the number is closer to 63. 000, the truth, no one really knows, but the building remembers. On the 5th floor, room 502 stands at the heart of the legend. In 1928, a head nurse was found hanging from the light fixture. Suicide, they said. She was unmarried, pregnant, alone. The shame, they said, drove her to it. 4 years later, another nurse reportedly jumped from the balcony. No one knows why. Visitors say the room is cold, even in July. People hear sobbing, some feel dizzy just standing near the doorway. Paranormal teams have reported EMF spikes, voice recordings, and shadows that seem to drift through the ceiling. Then there's the death tunnel. Formerly known as the body chute, this 500-foot underground tunnel was used to discreetly remove the dead from the hospital. Corpses were lowered on gurneys via a pulley system, so the living wouldn't see the steady stream of death. The tunnel now lies in darkness. Concrete walls stained by time, but the dead don't always stay quiet. Investigators have reported being touched, pushed, hearing dragging sounds when no one else is near. One visitor swore he heard a whisper say, "Not yet." He left. He never came back. The 3rd floor holds the spirit of a little boy. He's known only as Timmy. No one knows his story, but visitors bring him toys, balls, dolls, cars. They leave them in the hallway and watch as they move on their own. A small ball, untouched, rolls steadily into the shadows, then back. Others have heard giggling or seen a shape dart behind a doorway, too small to be an adult, too fast to follow. On the 4th floor, there are figures that watch from behind glassless windows. Lights flicker on and off, though there's no electricity. Footsteps echo in locked rooms. One tourist, taking photos in the long hallway, captured what she thought was her friend at the other end, but her friend was behind her. The photo showed a woman in hospital robes staring into the camera. And then there's the morgue. Even now, the air feels colder there, heavier. Metal tables still stand. Drawers line the walls, empty yet not. A security guard once locked the room behind him, only to hear the sound of something banging from inside. He opened the door. No one, nothing, only silence. But silence is rarely empty at Waverly. Today, the sanatorium is privately owned. It hosts ghost tours, fundraisers, even horror attractions. Yet many who come expecting cheap scares leave shaken by something they cannot name, because this place isn't just haunted, it's grieving. Grieving every breath that rattled in infected lungs. grieving every goodbye whispered through bloodied sheets, grieving the dreams that died here, young, alone, afraid. Waverly Hills is a wound that never closed, a place where death lived so long it left an imprint, and yet there's something almost sacred about it, as if the building refuses to be forgotten, not out of vengeance, but out of memory, to remind us of what was lost, of what we once endured, of how thin the veil between life and death really is. But if you think Waverly is the end of horror, think again, because our next destination is something entirely different. Not a place where the sick came to be healed, but where the insane were locked away. A sprawling asylum, crumbling walls, laughter that never ends, and rooms that have no keys. Next, we step into the decaying mind of Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, where madness still lingers, and the walls whisper secrets only the broken can understand. What if the music never stopped, because something darker kept it playing? In Wilder, Kentucky, just across the river from Cincinnati, stands a modest-looking nightclub. Neon signs, country ballads, barstools worn smooth by decades of late-night dancing. To most, Bobby Mackey's music world is just another roadside honky-tonk. But peel back the beat, listen past the laughter, and you'll hear something else. Whispers in the walls, a chill rising from the basement. And beneath it all, a scream no one can find. They say this place is the most haunted nightclub in America. Others say it's cursed, and some say it's hell's front door. Before the music, before the bar, before Bobby Mackey ever strummed a note, there was blood. In the 1800s, the building's foundation was part of a slaughterhouse. Animal blood flowed into a drainage pit that ran deep underground. When the slaughterhouse closed in the 1890s, legend says the pit remained and became something else. A well, a vortex, a possible portal. Not long after, the land around the site became notorious for occult rituals. Stories swirl of secret ceremonies, animal sacrifices, and invocations whispered into the dark. And then came Pearl Bryan in 1896. The headless body of Pearl, a young woman from Indiana, was found less than 2 miles from the site. She was 5 months pregnant. Her killers, 2 medical students, confessed that they intended to perform an abortion but botched it. They decapitated her and, according to legend, threw her head into the old slaughterhouse well. The murder shocked the nation. Her killers were hanged, but many believe Pearl never found peace. In the decades that followed, the building transformed from a meat plant to a roadhouse to a speakeasy during Prohibition, and with each change came more death, shootings, suicides, possession. In one tale, a club owner's daughter was found hanging in her dressing room. Before her death, she had been obsessed with seances and spirit boards, especially the well beneath the club. Locals claimed she had opened something. And then, in 1978, a man named Bobby Mackey bought the property and opened a music venue. He was warned, he didn't believe, but almost immediately things went wrong. Employees reported being pushed, scratched, and choked by invisible hands. One man, Carl Lawson, the club's longtime caretaker, claimed he was possessed in the basement. During an exorcism conducted on site, he writhed and screamed, his voice changing, his eyes blank. It was filmed, it still chills. Carl later said, "It's not the dead that haunt this place, it's what lives down there." Even Bobby's wife, Janet, was attacked. She claimed she was shoved down the stairs by an unseen force. She swore she heard a voice growl, "Get out." She didn't return for years. Despite it all, Bobby Mackey never closed the bar. He insists the stories are exaggerated, that music heals, that the stage is stronger than the dark. The paranormal investigators, priests, and skeptics have all visited, and many leave changed. In the basement, the well still exists, sealed now, but radiating something ancient, something wrong. Investigators have recorded EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, saying, "Help me, she's still here. Kill Carl," and chillingly, this is the gateway. The dressing rooms are cold even in summer. The men's restroom is notorious for apparitions. The dance floor is said to shift ever so slightly, like something beneath it wants to move. And upstairs, the music never stops, even when no band is booked. Even when the amps are off, people hear humming, guitar strings plucked with invisible fingers. And always that low, pulsing rhythm, like a heartbeat beneath the floor. Some say it's the building. Others say it's the well. And a few believe it's something older. Something drawn to music, to attention, to belief, because the devil doesn't need to be summoned with fire and brimstone. Sometimes he just needs a stage. Today, Bobby Mackey's music world remains open. People still dance, still sing, still laugh, but for those who linger too long near the basement stairs, who stare too long into the dark, the rhythm changes, and once you hear that other music, you never forget it. But our journey doesn't end in Kentucky, because while Bobby Mackey's is a stage of spiritual chaos, our next destination is something quieter. A house, a family, and an axe where silence became horror and the echoes were carved into wood. Next, we step into the boarded-up farmhouse of the Villisca Axe Murder House, where no one saw the killer come in, and no one ever saw them leave. What if evil didn't announce itself? What if horror didn't come in screams or storms, but with the quiet creak of floorboards in the night? Villisca is a small town, the kind with front porches, picket fences, and neighbors who wave. A sleepy corner of Iowa where nothing much ever happens, except for one night, a single night in June of 1912, that changed everything. The Moore family, Josiah, his wife Sarah, their 4 children, and 2 visiting girls. Lena and Anna Stillinger spent the evening at church. It was Children's Day. The kids sang, smiled, walked home hand in hand. Sometime after midnight, someone entered the house, someone carrying an axe. By dawn, 8 people were dead, all bludgeoned, most as they slept. No one heard a thing. The doors were locked from the inside, the curtains drawn, mirrors covered with cloth, and the killer never found. No fingerprints, no footprints, no confession. Only the axe. Left leaning against the wall, and whispers decade after decade of something darker lingering in that home. Today, the house has been restored to its 1912 state. No electricity, no running water, no distractions, just wood, silence, and memory. From the moment you step inside, you feel it. The air is still, too still. The floor groans beneath your feet, as if remembering who once walked there and who never walked out. The children's room upstairs is the hardest. Toys have been left as offerings, dolls, stuffed animals. Some visitors report seeing them move. Others swear they hear giggles and then silence. Worse than hearing something is hearing nothing, a kind of nothing that watches. In the parents' bedroom, guests have experienced headaches, nausea, pressure on their chest, as if something wants them out. One man fainted just standing in the doorway. Another claims he heard a deep male voice growl a word he refuses to repeat. But perhaps the most disturbing room is the attic. Investigators believe the killer may have hidden there before the murders, waiting, listening, watching the family move about their evening, kiss their children goodnight unaware. Visitors today have reported scratching sounds from inside the walls, cold bursts of air, the feeling of being followed even though no one else is on the tour. One woman, alone upstairs during a daylight visit, snapped a photo toward the staircase. In the image, a figure, pale, standing, not her tour guide. Not a guest, something else. Paranormal teams from across the country have descended on Villisca. Some leave with nothing, others leave shaken. EVPs captured in the house reveal chilling whispers. Help me, they're still here. Why? One recording caught at 2:10 a.m., believed to be the approximate time of the murders, simply said, "Don't go downstairs." In 2014, a paranormal investigator stabbed himself in the chest while staying overnight in the house. He survived, but he said something told him to do it. He never came back. Skeptics say it's the power of suggestion, of darkness and imagination, but others believe the Villisca Axe Murder House holds a kind of emotional imprint, a trauma so violent it left a scar on the very foundation. The murderer was never caught, justice was never served, the story never ended. Maybe that's why the dead don't rest. They were silenced, quickly, brutally, without reason. And now they speak through the cold air, through flickering lights, through unease, through us. You don't walk through the Villisca house, you tiptoe, you hold your breath, you listen, because something there is still waiting. But now we leave the small-town shadows and step into a battlefield drenched in blood. Not just one family lost, but tens of thousands. A field where cannons once roared, now silent, but the soldiers, they still march. Next, we cross into sacred ground, Gettysburg Battlefield, Pennsylvania, where the ghosts don't hide, they stand in formation. What if the ground itself could scream? What if every step you took echoed not just in time, but in memory? In the rolling hills of southern Pennsylvania lies a field like any other, grassy, peaceful, birds overhead, the breeze warm against your face, but then you look again and you see them. A flicker of blue and gray, a formation in the fog, a man with no eyes still reaching for his rifle. This is Gettysburg, a place where history was carved in blood, and where the dead never left. Between July 1st and July 3rd, 1863, more than 51,000 men were killed, wounded, or missing in one of the deadliest battles ever fought on American soil. Blue vs. Gray, brother vs. brother, 3 days that shaped a nation and soaked the soil in so much blood it was said the creek turned red. Soldiers weren't buried with ceremony. They were stacked in rows, mass graves. Forgotten names, torn uniforms, and even now, over 150 years later, Gettysburg doesn't sleep. It mourns. Ask the park rangers, the locals, the ghost hunters, even the skeptics. They'll all tell you the same thing: something walks here. The most infamous haunt is known simply as Devil's Den, a rocky outcrop where Confederate sharpshooters once held the high ground, firing down on Union troops. Hundreds died in the crevices, their blood soaking into the stone. Photographers who visit often find their equipment drained, batteries dead, images corrupted. Others report seeing a barefoot man dressed in ragged clothes with a large floppy hat. He appears suddenly, grins strangely, and says one thing: "What you're looking for is over there." He points and vanishes. The triangular field just beyond Devil's Den is worse. Cold spots appear on sweltering days. Visitors feel dizzy. Some collapse. Cameras won't focus. Phones glitch. People report hearing drums, bugles, yells, then silence. Too much silence. One woman claimed she saw an entire line of soldiers marching across the field. She thought it was reenactors until they walked straight through a fence and kept going. Near Little Round Top, where Union forces held a critical defensive line, the energy grows even heavier. A reenactor once reported seeing a man in full Union dress walk out of the woods. Hand him cartridges and say, "You'll need these soon." When he looked again, the man was gone. The cartridges were real. Inside the town of Gettysburg itself, the buildings are just as haunted. The Jenny Wade House, where the only civilian died during the battle, is now a museum. Visitors have heard the sound of sobbing, the rustle of skirts, and unseen hands brushing their hair. At the Farnsworth House Inn, Confederate snipers once fired from the attic. Now, guests staying overnight report footsteps above them, chairs moving, whispers in the dark. And then there's the Gettysburg Orphanage, built after the war to care for the children of fallen soldiers. But it became known for cruelty, particularly from one headmistress who locked children in the dark basement for hours, even days. That basement is still there. People who enter often leave quickly, shaking, sobbing, refusing to speak. Some say they hear scratching. Others feel small hands tugging at their clothes. Some never make it down the stairs at all. But the most chilling stories don't come from homes or inns or rocky ridges. They come from the battlefield itself, because Gettysburg is not a place where ghosts hide. It's where they march, out in the open, in full view. Tourists report hearing volleys of gunfire when no one is shooting, cannons that rumble in the distance. One man even claimed to feel the rush of wind as a rider galloped past him, though there was no horse, no rider. Only a hoof print where the grass lay flattened. Some say the spirits don't even know they're dead, that they rise again with every sunrise, that they still wait for orders, still fight, still bleed. Gettysburg is not a haunting, it's a loop, a scar, a memory playing itself over and over until someone listens. Today, the battlefield is a national park, a site of remembrance, education, reflection, but if you visit, come with reverence. Because the soil beneath your feet is sacred, and because the ones who fell here still stand. But as we leave Gettysburg behind, our next stop carries a different kind of weight. Not the tragedy of war, but the silence of isolation, where inmates were locked behind bars surrounded by cold water and still found no escape. Next, we sail west toward the wind-whipped walls of Alcatraz Island, California, where justice was swift. And the ghosts are patient. What if war never ended? Not in history books, not in graves, not even in time. In southern Pennsylvania, the fields roll gently like waves of green and gold. Trees sway, wildflowers bloom, everything feels still. But stillness here is a lie, because in July of 1863, more than 160,000 men converged on this peaceful countryside. And in just 3 days, over 51,000 were killed, wounded, or vanished. Their blood didn't just stain the soil, it sank into it. This is Gettysburg, a place where the cannons fell silent, But the dead did not. You don't have to believe in ghosts to feel Gettysburg. You only have to stand still. Because in places like Devil's Den, you'll hear the whispers. Where sharpshooters once crouched between boulders, now visitors report chills, flickers of light, and the voice of a man who grins and says, "What you're looking for is over there," and then disappears. In the triangular field, the grass is always damp, even when it hasn't rained in weeks. Some say it's just the dew, others say it's residue. Marching, running, bleeding. Many describe feeling sick, lightheaded, or overcome by sorrow, as if they're standing too close to something still happening. Because maybe they are, at Little Round Top, where Union soldiers held high ground with sheer grit. Tourists often hear phantom commands shouted through invisible smoke. One visitor reported being handed bullets by a man in uniform, only to later discover they were Civil War era cartridges. There were no reenactors on the field that day. Even in town, ghosts walk openly. The Jenny Wade house, where the only civilian was killed by a stray bullet, still echoes with weeping. At night, guests say they hear her footsteps pacing. The Farnsworth House Inn, where Confederate snipers fired from the attic, is now a restaurant. Patrons feel hands brushing their shoulders, lights flicker. One server swore she saw a soldier vanish into the wall. And then there's the Gettysburg Orphanage, founded to house children who lost their fathers in battle, but later twisted by cruelty. Visitors to the basement often leave changed. Some scream, others cry. One woman collapsed, whispering, "They're still down here. Not all ghosts are soldiers." Some are the ones left behind, and yet it's not fear that defines Gettysburg. It's grief. The land mourns, the trees remember, the fog knows where to go. Because when that much blood is spilled in one place, time doesn't move forward. It breaks. Today, Gettysburg is preserved, a national park, a classroom, a symbol. But for those who walk its fields at dusk, it's something else. You might see a flicker of blue or gray just ahead. You might hear drums from a tree line that wasn't there a moment ago, or you might feel a hand on your shoulder. Not heavy, not angry, just a whisper. "I'm still here." But now, we trade muskets for metal bars, the weight of duty for the silence of isolation. Because our next destination isn't a battlefield. It's a rock, floating, watching, waiting off the coast of California. The most infamous prison in America awaits. Next, we ferry toward the stone-cold silence of Alcatraz Island, where time has no key and the cells may never open. What if a prison didn't just trap the body, but the soul? 2 kilometers off the coast of San Francisco, shrouded in cold fog and sharp wind, lies a slab of rock that once held the most dangerous men in America. A fortress of stone surrounded by water too cold to swim, too far to escape. This is Alcatraz, the rock, a place of punishment, and some say eternal captivity. From 1934 to 1963, Alcatraz was the ultimate stop in America's prison system. Only the worst came here: mob bosses, hitmen, escape artists, traitors. Among them Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, and Robert Stroud, the Birdmen of Alcatraz. But even the hardest men broke on this island. No privacy, no warmth, no sound except waves, metal doors, and the footsteps of guards. And maybe something else. The haunting begins in cell block D, known as the Hole. D block was reserved for the violent, the unstable, the broken. Inmates spent 23 hours a day inside their cells, sometimes in total darkness. Cell 14D is the most feared, freezing cold, oppressively silent. One night, a prisoner began screaming, claiming something inhuman was in the cell with him. He howled through the night until the guards found him dead, strangled. They ruled it suicide, but the autopsy showed bruises shaped like fingers. Guards still refuse to linger in 14D. Visitors step inside and gasp. Some feel pressure on their chest. Others say they can't breathe at all. One woman collapsed just seconds after crossing the threshold, sobbing uncontrollably, though she couldn't say why. Inmates once spoke of a thing that lived in the shadows. They called it the man with glowing eyes. He never spoke, never moved, just watched. Then there's the hospital ward where inmates were treated or experimented on. Paranormal teams report high EMF readings in empty rooms, whispers in the infirmary, doors that slam shut without wind. One nurse who once worked there said she saw a man in a white coat vanish before her eyes. Another guest reported hearing the squeak of a gurney rolling down the hall, but no one else was there, and the wheels weren't touching the ground. In cell 13, visitors claim to hear banjo music, soft, sad, distant. Al Capone. broken by illness and isolation, spent his final months at Alcatraz playing banjo in the shower room, away from other prisoners. Now, the notes linger, even when no instruments remain. Guards who worked the night shift told stories of hearing voices when the prison was empty, chains dragging, footsteps above when no one was assigned to that level. One man quit after seeing a group of figures standing in the old mess hall, then disappearing in an instant. And yet it's not the violence or the spirits that haunt most, it's the desperation. Inmates scratched messages into their walls, still here, not crazy, this is the end. The silence on Alcatraz isn't peaceful, it's hungry. It wraps around you as you move from cell to cell. It presses against your skin. It listens, maybe because some of the men died not in chains, but in guilt, or rage, or madness, and their souls didn't follow the boats off the island when the prison closed. They stayed, watching, waiting. Today, Alcatraz is a tourist site. Visitors ride ferries, take photos, listen to audio tours, but some hear more. One woman captured a man's voice on tape saying, "Come back." Another felt a hand grip hers in the isolation cell, and when she turned, the corridor was empty. Even the most hardened skeptics leave Alcatraz quieter than they arrived, because the rock doesn't need to prove anything. It knows what it holds, and it holds tight. But as we step off the island and back onto land, we trade stone cells for something older. Not a prison, but a gate, a rural cemetery. Barely a handful of tombstones, but a legend whispered in every town from Kansas to beyond. They say it's one of the 7 gates of hell, and it's not locked. Next, we enter the windblown grass and cursed shadows of Stull Cemetery, Kansas, where the church has no roof, the stairs laid down but never come back up. What if there are places where the rules of the world no longer apply? No ticking clocks, no reason, no light, just the space between. In the tiny, near-forgotten town of Stull, Kansas, population fewer than 30, sits a cemetery so ordinary it becomes dangerous. Stull doesn't shout, it doesn't lure you in with legends carved into tombstones. It whispers, just enough to make you wonder. And once you wonder, you're already part of it. Local lore calls it the gateway to hell, and whether you believe in that or not, what happens here is hard to explain. The cemetery dates back to the 1850s, modest, rural, just a few dozen marked graves and a collapsed stone church that hasn't had a roof in decades. But the stories, they started long before the building fell. It is said that twice a year, on the spring equinox and Halloween, the devil himself rises through a hidden staircase that once led beneath the church floor. That passage has long since been sealed, but no one knows how deep it went or what it once held. Those who dare trespass at night describe overwhelming sensation, vertigo, pressure in the chest, a ringing in the ears, and in some cases, time lost. More than one visitor has claimed they looked at their watch, then woke up hours later, feet dirty, face damp, unable to remember how they got there. Others have sworn they saw figures in the field, hooded, unmoving, just watching, not attacking, not chasing, just being. One man took a photo near the remains of the old church. When he reviewed it later, he found a second face beside his own, pale, sunken, mouth open in a scream. He was alone that night, in the 1970s. Rumors of satanic rituals began to spread. Pentagrams, candles, animal bones. Locals said it was just teenagers trying to scare each other. But then the animals began disappearing, and sometimes they were found, but not whole. One night, a pair of college students snuck into the graveyard with a tape recorder. They captured a sound that to this day remains unexplained, not wind, not voices, something deeper. A low growl, mechanical, breathing. They both dropped out within the year. Some say the collapsed church was cursed from the beginning, that it was built on land where indigenous people warned settlers never to walk. Others say a child was born there once, but not quite human. The child was said to speak fluently at birth, with eyes completely black. Never seen again. But every few years someone claims they've heard a voice behind the altar stone whispering in a language that doesn't belong to this earth. The tree near the gate, once used for hangings, was struck by lightning twice. It still stands, charred and twisted. A cross once nailed to its trunk melted into the bark. No one ever put it back. And then there's the silence. So many have said that when you step into Stull Cemetery after dark, all sound dies. No wind, no bugs, no heartbeats, just a crushing quiet, like the world itself is holding its breath. In 1993, Pope John Paul II reportedly ordered his plane to divert around eastern Kansas. He refused to fly over Stull. Today, the area is fenced off. No trespassing signs everywhere. Police patrol at night, more to protect people from the cemetery than the other way around. But still they come. Ghost hunters. Thrill seekers, the curious, and some who just want to know, is it real? No one stays long. Those who do rarely speak about what they saw, because this is not a place of stories. It's a place of presence. You don't talk at Stull, you listen. And when you leave, if you're lucky, you're the only one who does. But this is not the end of our journey, because across this country the echoes continue. The haunted don't stop at churches or hospitals. They linger in music, in paint, in airwaves, and sometimes they follow you home. Next, we'll close the circle with one final place, one last haunting, and a question. What if the dead don't haunt places? What if they haunt us? What if the ghosts aren't in the buildings, but in us? We've walked together through mansions with locked doors that led to nowhere, through hospitals where whispers cry louder than screams. We've stepped on blood-soaked battlefields, creaking prison floors, splintered church pews, and stared into mirrors that refuse to reflect only the living. 13 places, 13 stories, and yet, a single question remains. Why do they stay? Some say it's unfinished business. Some say it's punishment. Some scientists, skeptics, even priests say it's just memory, trauma, imprint. But what if it's something more? What if we're the ones who keep them here? Our fear, our fascination, our refusal to let go. We name them, we search for them. We build whole industries around the idea that death is not the end. Maybe these spirits are echoes of what we've done, or what we refuse to acknowledge. And maybe, just maybe, they're not here to frighten us. Maybe they're trying to remind us that pain leaves a mark, that time doesn't heal everything, that we are not alone even in silence. Each story we've told comes from a place we can still visit, but they all point somewhere deeper. A place without coordinates, without blueprints, without escape. The human heart, because grief is a haunting, guilt is a haunting. Memory is the most powerful haunting of all. We build walls and fill them with photos and call that safety. But the past doesn't need walls, it needs a witness. So the next time you walk into a room and feel something watching, the next time you hear your name in an empty hallway, the next time the lights flicker or the air goes still or a dream follows you past morning, don't ask what it was, ask what it wanted you to remember. Because maybe ghosts aren't lost souls, maybe they're just parts of ourselves we never buried properly. And maybe, just maybe, some doors shouldn't be closed, because once you hear the whispers, you never forget them. But that's a story for another night.